So this video is a follow-up to my previous video about humiliation rituals and spiritual abuse. So you haven't seen that one, go and check that one out. In this video, I'm going to be following up about humiliation rituals and what they look like, some examples of them. In the last video, I gave an example of prayer and how prayer is a humiliation ritual. Well, it's not, but it can be used as one in spiritually abusive environments. It's not, it's the what matters less is what is being done, and what matters more is why it's being done in the intended effect. And so with humiliation rituals, um, that you have to remember that there are two things. There's a message behind the ritual, and then there's also a meaning. And what I mean by meaning is like the intention behind that ritual and what whoever's doing that ritual, what they want to do. And so I've talked about prayer, but there are some other forms that you need to be careful of. So, something that comes up that I have seen a lot are meetings and how meetings are used as humiliation rituals. So let's think about what a meeting would look like in a healthy spiritual environment or any healthy environment. Meetings are typically, if you look at how a meeting would go, usually there would be adequate notice. So party A would want party B, to have a meeting. Let's say, okay, we'd like to have a meeting. There would be some sort of agenda. You'd stick to the agenda and then you're done. And the purpose of the meeting is to exchange information. Sometimes it could be to build or strengthen camaraderie, get on the same page, things like that. In a spiritually abusive environment, you can have the same meeting, but it can be done with a very different intention and convey a very different message. And so, something that you should be very careful about is an impromptu meeting. Spiritually abusive people love to rush things and they love using the element of surprise to gain an advantage over their victims. And so, and I understand, another thing I say often is you need to be able to use nuance on this channel because I can just see someone in the comments being like, oh, if somebody has an impromptu meeting, does that mean they're spiritually abusive? No, it doesn't. Okay. Use nuance. There can be impromptu or emergency meetings for all kinds of reasons. I'm talking about in spiritually abusive people and situations and environments, you will see these impromptu meetings leveraged more often and used as a form of abuse. And in this case, a humiliation ritual. And so I always tell people, be very careful if you are asked to meet on very short notice. So let's say you're in the hallway, it's like, oh, can we meet with you for like 5 minutes? I would just personally just say you can't do it unless you really trust the person and you feel safe. If you're in an environment where you don't feel safe, don't accept that invitation and don't go because you'll be setting yourself up for possible humiliation and other sorts of abusive behavior. But typically what happens is they'll either say, well, let's have a meeting with very short notice, and they won't tell you what the meeting is about and they won't tell you who is there. And those are huge red flags. And the reason they do this is because surprise and control. So you don't know what you're walking into. You could walk into a meeting and have 20 people there, right? And they all knew about the meeting and you didn't. And you basically were being ambushed, okay? You're walking into a trap. So that it can be a form or a way of using numbers and the element of surprise to humiliate you. And so it's really important to know what you're getting into. Now, let's say that sometimes meetings don't necessarily have to be like sprung upon you like that. Sometimes a meeting will be a regular meeting, and what you thought you were meeting about is not what the meeting is about at all. And so, and even in spiritually abusive environments, that happens quite a bit. And what that does is it changes your expectations and it puts you on edge. So now all of a sudden it's not so abnormal that we're supposed to be meeting about one thing and we're meeting about something completely different. That's not normal and that's not healthy. At the very least, it should be acknowledged. Hey, I know we were going to have a meeting about the budget, but something more urgent has come up. Is there any way we can postpone that to later and deal with this issue? That's how you address it. And it's not something that happens all the time. So, in these types of situations, having the element of surprise, having a changed agenda, is that's a humiliation ritual in the sense that you are caught off guard. And when you're caught off guard, it's a lot easier for people to abuse you, humiliate you, run game on you, do all these sorts of things that are not healthy or kind. And so when you think about the specific situation of a meeting, um, and what a humiliation ritual would look like in a meeting. You could be ganged up on, you could be made fun of, you could be confronted about something without having the chance to explain or defend yourself. Okay, so people have talked about how those things have happened to them. And sometimes the meeting is also used in an inappropriate way. So let's say somebody has a question for you about something. Okay, you said you were going to be here at this time, but you weren't. Maybe you missed some sort of event. And so instead of the person just texting you and saying, "Hey, where were you?" they now call a meeting and ask you this in front of a bunch of people. That's spiritually abusive behavior. And that is a humiliation ritual because it's meant to humiliate you. Because imagine how like awful that must feel to kind of have it's almost like bringing it's overcorrection, it's doing too much in that situation. Okay. So that is one way that can look using a meeting inappropriately. So something that could have been a text or an email is now a meeting with the intention of humiliating you. Another way humiliation rituals can work is by trying to put you on the spot and asking you to do something without giving you time. And so imagine there are all these people here and they're like, oh, well, we really need someone to head up this committee. You're the best person to do it. Can you do it? And you haven't had time to think about it. And that can be humiliating too, because that's very disrespectful. Somebody who respects your time and somebody who respects your gifts and your abilities will give you ample time to respond to a request and not do it in a way that puts you on the spot. And so that is humiliation. And the reason why these humiliation rituals occur is they're sending a message that we have the power, that whoever the authority people are, or whoever's behind the meetings, and it also is intended to belittle you and kind of like knock you off kilter. And so now you're in a position where you feel rattled, you don't feel prepared, you feel humiliated. And when you're dealing with that rush of really challenging emotions and everything, it can be very hard to think clearly and act rationally. Sometimes a humiliation ritual can also be a trap. Think about somebody who is very calm, very even keeled, right? Sometimes people don't like that. And so, what they want to do in this humiliation ritual is to get you to act out of character, to lose emotional control, and to blame you for that sort of response. So they may do things like, say some very awful things about you, and you have one of two options. You can either fight back and then be labeled as emotionally unstable or mean or whatever, or sit there and get humiliated. You're really in a tough spot. And so it's really important that you understand the way these humiliation rituals work. People who engage in these use the element of surprise, either by announcing a meeting or changing the agenda in the meeting or using the meeting in an inappropriate way to either get you to agree to something or to leverage attacks on you with the intention of you either humiliating yourself by not speaking up for yourself or by acting out of character. And humiliation rituals, again, they're not just limited to meetings, they're not just limited to prayer. some of you have talked about how you've been in situations where a leader has talked about you in a message, either directly or indirectly, and that is a humiliation ritual. And I've had people, talk about how there have been times when this pastor or leader was talking about them, but didn't mention their name, but kept looking at them. They gave them a look. Um, and they knew that look was meant for them. They might say something and then, glance at the person real quick, and maybe only that person and the person on the receiving end caught that look, and it was meant to convey something. And so one thing that I would really advise you to take away from this is that focus less on the medium and focus more on number one, the message, and number two, the meaning. Because people who don't understand spiritual abuse will be very quick to dismiss what you talk about. If you say, there was this meeting and they were really mean to me in this meeting and they did this, somebody who doesn't understand spiritual abuse might be like, well, just get over it. It was a stupid meeting. What's the big deal? Not realizing that that meeting was done in a deliberate manner, right? And there were deliberate things that were done in order to get a reaction or to gain some kind of purpose to establish dominance. So it's really important that you understand that and that you are aware of that. This is part two. I will do in part three, I'm going to talk about how to sort of like prepare yourself, defend yourself, and also, yeah, tips, strategies like that. So if you do want that, let me know in the comment section and I'll probably put together a part three. So I hope you have a wonderful day that is filled with peace. Bye bye.